It's been a long time since I got to stand up before you and share the Word of God. I hope you haven't forgotten who I am or what I'm preaching on. But for those of you who have slept since the last time I spoken, we're in a series called the Book of Hebrews, New Priesthood, New Hope, New Covenant. Now, we have been expounding chapter 7. We've been 3 weeks ago, we were in the middle of chapter 7. It's a complex argument dealing with Melchizedek and the priesthood of Yeshua versus the priesthood of the Mosaic covenant, the Levitical priesthood. A complex argument that builds upon itself. So we're going to do a few minutes of review and cover previously what we've seen in chapter 7 of New Priesthood, New Hope, New Covenant in the book of Hebrews. Now, bringing out my handy-dandy chart, the graphical representation of Hebrews' thematic development. Oh, that's a mouthful. You'll see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 themes. It's along the left side of an 8th theme, which runs along most of the book. So 8 themes in all, graphically coded to let you know where they show up in the chapters along the way, and the color scheme to let you know where in the development of the argument process we are. Now, in chapter 7, you'll see it's extremely dense. It's only in themes, it's only surpassed in its density of number of themes by chapters 9 and 10, where the theological discussion comes to a climax. And like one of those really great movies or TV programs where you have multiple storylines and you're introduced to people who are not related at all, and all of a sudden they're in the midst of, by the end of the movie or by the middle of the TV series, you begin to bring all of those unrelated themes together and those relationships together, and all of a sudden you see everybody's interconnected. So too, although these are related themes, he's introducing and developing each one of them a little bit at a time. You introduce this ingredient, put that on the stove. Look, everybody, I'm doing this ingredient. Now it's going to go on the back of the stove. Every now and then, we're going to have to stir it. And as we just don't worry about what's in the back of the stove, we'll bring something now to the front burner and introduce a new ingredient, and everybody pay attention to that. Now we'll move that one to the back of the stove as well, making sure to keep everything stirred as we introduce new subjects and new ingredients and new concepts to the argument. That's what's happening here. And you see that chapter 7 is rather rich with such themes as Yeshua as son and Yeshua as the new high priest. An introduction to the new covenant, which will be nicely developed in chapter 8. That'll be next week. The idea of faith being very, very important, and the great theme of Yeshua's supremacy, of course, running almost without interruption throughout those first 10 chapters. First 10 chapters of Hebrews are the theological argument. The last 3 chapters are the applicational and pastoral section. So you see the densest area, the thicket of concepts and ideas is right here in this section right here. The water is all the ingredients are now coming to a boil, and we better really stir the pots. And that's indeed what's happening. We're stirring the pots. We saw The previous time we discussed, we saw the superiority of Melchizedek to Abraham. So the superiority of Melchizedek to Abraham. And developing that, we saw that Hebrews views the Levitical priesthood as a prophetic type. In other words, a picture, a prophetic picture of things to come. Of what? The Melchizedekian priesthood, of course. The Levitical priesthood was divinely designed and established for a specific era in history. It wasn't an error, it was good stuff, but for a specific era in history. And it served a very specific and preparatory function. Say preparatory. Preparatory to what? To the Melchizedekian priesthood of our Yeshua, of our Messiah. Yeshua, whose priesthood serves as the Levitical priesthood's prophetic antitype. So what did the Levitical priesthood serve as a type of? The priesthood of Yeshua. And in fact, Yeshua's priesthood fulfills and replaces the previous system, the typological shadow, with the superior one, the typological substance. And really, when you think about it, how else could it have been? One does not use the old computer alongside the new computer. One does not drive the old jalopy with the new sports car with one tuchus, only one seat for you, bucket or not. One does not watch the old black and white console TV, 19 inches that fit into a console much larger than the TV itself. One does not watch that when one has a 65-inch 4K Samsung flat screen TV. You don't do it. It's not done. Not only wouldn't it be prudent, it wouldn't make sense. And that is the argument here. And so we see the argument of the superiority of Yeshua's priesthood to the Levitical priesthood. We've seen thus far throughout the book, we've seen the argument that Yeshua is superior to angels, and Yeshua is superior to Moses, and now we've seen into Aaron and to the Levitical priesthood. And you're getting the concept, okay, of Yeshua is better. And he says in chapter 7, to summarize chapter 7 very quickly, pick a few highlights. Now, if perfection was through the Levitical priesthood, for on the basis of it, the people of what? The Levitical priesthood. On the basis of the Levitical priesthood, the people received the law. What further need was there for another priest to arise according to the order of Melchizedek and not be designated according to the order of Aaron? Very different priesthood. If the initial priesthood was sufficient, was good enough, was brought along perfection, completion, spiritual maturity, why would you need to replace it? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You never need a superior product if you're happy with the product, if the product that you have right now is doing an excellent job. There's a recognition that it's not doing an excellent job. Perfection could never be found for the Levitical priesthood, on which rests the Torah itself. For when the priesthood is changed, which the author of Hebrews is definitively arguing, that's not up for debate. The priesthood has changed. We are no longer under the Levitical priesthood. Now that Yeshua has given his life for us, has been risen from the tomb after 3 days, and ascended to the point of exaltation at the right hand of his Father, it's very clear, unless you're under a rock somewhere, not Iraq, the nation, that the priesthood has changed. So when that happens, of necessity, there takes place a change of law as well. I was just driving, rented a car while I was speaking at a conference in Florida. And from Florida, I drove around the state, stopping and seeing people that I needed to see, friends, family, supporters, and then made my way up to Georgia. And I have to tell you that while there's a lot of similarity between driving in Texas and driving in Florida and Georgia, it's not a 100% match, point by point by point. There are different laws regarding turning on red and various different highway differences that you have to pay attention. And for goodness sake, you better have, in Florida, you better have a toll tag, because you can't travel through the state. Maybe you could, but it was impossible for me to figure out how to do so efficiently without going and needing my Florida Sun Pass, right? I have, in my car at home, I have a Texas toll tag. But I couldn't bring the Texas toll tag to Florida. Change of state required a change of toll tag. Same thing. Required a being heads up. There are some differences here, a lot of similarity. Same kind of tag, same kind of a system. You pay to drive on the highway, but of necessity, there's a change. And you better be aware there's a change while you're driving in Florida and later Georgia, and that you're no longer, I have a feeling, Toto, we're not in Texas anymore. Right? Of necessity, when the priesthood is changed, there takes place a change of law as well. Hebrews' conclusions concerning the Levitical priesthood will necessarily impact the Mosaic legislation, Torah, in other words. Well, why can't we just slice and dice? Why can't we do a little theological, exegetical surgery and excise the Levitical priesthood from the entirety of the Mosaic legislation? But no, it necessarily impacts the Mosaic legislation, because the entire system in its totality finds in the priesthood its very basis of existence. That's not my opinion. That's the argument of the author of Hebrews. So if you're trying to do some surgery and you'll lose the entire patient. Torah cannot be neatly compartmentalized because it was given to Israel as a single legislative unit composed of consistently overlapping ceremonial and civic and moral legislation. And the ceremonial is attached to the civic and the moral. They're all intertwined and interconnected. You cannot slice and dice. Elimination of the Levitical legislation from Torah would destroy the Torah's construction, resulting in a system more holy than holy. That, I thought, warranted bringing up again because of the cleverness of it. I couldn't let it go. I wanted some recognition. Yes, okay, thank you very much. Yeah. And this is clearer still. If another priest arises according to the likeness of Melchizedek, and of course the argument thus far has been Yeshua is a lot like Melchizedek, who has become such a priest, high priest, not on the basis of a law of physical requirement like the Levitical priests, but according to the power of an indestructible life. In other words, the Melchizedekian priesthood is completely separate and distinct from the Levitical system. There's no overlap there, because the Melchizedekian priesthood is based not on legislative genealogical requirements, which what the Levitical system was, but upon the power of Yeshua's indestructible life. One priesthood is based upon Torah. The other is based upon power. That's the argument. Again, not my opinion, the argument of Hebrews. For on the one hand, there is a setting aside of a former commandment because of its weakness and uselessness. Again, not my opinion. The Torah here is called weak and useless. Not in every aspect for every issue, but as far as reconciling one to God in a way that once for all unites him, he and you. In a way that creates not only the opportunity, but the guarantee of spiritual maturity. And a process that will end in spiritual perfection. Not in this life, so don't get excited. But eventually we will all be glorified. Right? We will all achieve if we follow Messiah. We will all achieve spiritual equity. Okay? And I use the term, this is a term that's popular to use right now, means that we all have to wind up with the same result. Right? Merit, forget about merit. But you know what? Merit, New Testament, the original diversity, inclusion, and equity system. It's God's, not man's. Man, or shall I say, a specific man, Marx's system, diversity, equity, inclusion, or diversity, inclusion, equity, DIE, for a acronym. This is the original. This is God's. Jew and Gentile. Couldn't be more diverse than that. Look at this room. We're a diverse crowd. Socioeconomically, ethnically, Jewish, Gentile, male, female. It's a diverse crowd. But we're all together, included together, equal together. And merit never had any part of this system because it's not on the basis of merit or on any actions at all that we take that we are saved. It's not on the basis of our ethnic identity. It's on the basis of God's grace. And we will all, no matter where we are, no matter where we started, no matter where we are right now, we will all arrive at the same conclusion, the same place. Spiritual equity of glorification. We do that not through the Levitical system, but we do that through the Melchizedekian system. So on the one hand, and where you have a one hand, you got to have another hand. There is a setting aside of former commandment. The law made nothing perfect. But on the other hand, there is the bringing in of a better hope, a new hope, a better hope, and a superior hope. And it's through that hope. That's how we draw near to God, not through Levi, not through the Levitical system, not through Torah. We draw near to God through the new covenant. That is what we commemorate every month when we take communion. What we did today. We draw near to God. So there's the setting aside and there is the bringing in. The setting aside and the bringing in. And one necessitates the other. If you're going to bring in the new and superior executive assistant, then you better pink slip the previous inferior executive assistant. Okay? If the employee was doing a great job, you would never need to hire someone better. But they certainly can't function together. How do they function together? Right? They can't. They can't both be executive assistants. So one is set aside, one is brought in. So the bringing in, and that's the argument of Hebrews that brings us up to speed. So according to Hebrews, Torah was proven ineffective. Had a proven ineffective track record. And, well, maybe you didn't give it a long enough runway to prove itself. Well, how about 15 centuries? The track record, Israel's history, failure in bringing Israel to a state of spiritual maturity. No one can argue that the Jewish people, their spirituality evolved from the time of Moses, to the time of the Second Temple. No one can argue that point that, oh yes, every day they became better and closer to the Lord through the system they had. No, it demonstrated. Read the Old Testament at some point. Read the Hebrew Bible. And tell me I'm wrong. Tell me the author of Hebrews is wrong. That the track record of the Hebrew Bible is clear testimony of Torah's failure in bringing Israel to a state of spiritual maturity. Didn't have what it took. It was never designed to perfect anything or anyone. The Torah was designed, as Paul argues, to lead Israel to their Messiah. Torah's purpose was to serve as our tutor, a diagnostician of our innate condition of sinfulness. Excellent. Educating us of our need. Excellent. And preparing us for the coming of our Messiah. And in as much, verse 20, 9 more verses to go, in as much as it is not without an oath. Now, I have oath highlighted here because this is a big word, a big rhetorical word for the author of Hebrews. He's going to use this term oath here and at the end of the chapter. So just like perfection bracketed the previous section, it could never make things perfect, but Yeshua makes things perfect. So you had a top and a bottom, nice sandwich, theological sandwich. You're going to have an oath sandwich. And the oath is going to serve as a piece of bread, and oath at the end of the section, telling you that this is a passage that holds together, with the idea of oath providing the sandbox in which the author is going to discuss his point. And see, talking about the superiority of the priesthood of Yeshua, and demonstrated by means of an irrevocable divine oath. What irrevocable divine oath have we been reading about and reading about and reading about in the book of Hebrews thus far? Psalm 110, verse 4. That you are a priest forever according to the order of Melchizedek, quote unquote, the Lord. Okay? Divine oath. So that's what he's talking about. It is not without an oath, double negative, okay? So it's with an oath. No, not without means with an oath, right? Because even the law of God takes second place to the oath of God. Oath trumps law. Divine decree trumps Torah. And if you want to argue otherwise, then you have to argue that, well, just because God said it in Torah, then he has no ability to supersede that which he created, Torah. God created Torah, right? We all agree with the word of God, right? Created Torah. But his oath, his divine commitment, trumps that legislative system that he created. So the law of God takes second place to the oath of God. The function of any oath, right? We get there in the court. Put your hand on the Bible, raise your right hand. I do solemnly swear, right? This oath characterizes God's promise as final and eternal, irrevocable, unchangeable even. For they indeed became priests without an oath. It's the Levitical priests didn't need an oath. You just needed DNA. You needed to be descended from the right set of parents. It was hereditary. Tribe of Levi, and specifically the family of Aaron. They indeed became priests without an oath. But he, with an oath, Yeshua, had the benefit of an oath through the one who said to him, the Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever. Psalm 110, verse 4. So much the more, also Jesus has become the guarantee of a better covenant. So, you take an oath, I solemnly swear. Well, what are you swearing on? Okay? Swearing on the Bible. We swear on the Bible in this country, generally speaking. Right? Because the idea is that by putting your hand on the Bible, you will be telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help me God. If you don't believe in God or don't think that there's any penalty for lying, then it's not a problem. But for the rest of us, we tell the truth. But Yeshua himself is the guarantee of a better covenant.
I ain't going to bet with you if you're going to start diving after him. I'll guarantee.
Remember Justin Wilson? I guarantee. I used to watch him back before we had streaming. This is back when I was in seminary and I had my little 13-inch portable that I picked up at Best Buy with the rabbit ears, and very little was on, but Justin was on PBS, and I'd catch him, and his Cajun accent charmed me, and I always remember that. I guarantee. And Jesus is the guarantee of the new covenant. And here we begin the argument here of the we're going to continue it throughout chapter 8. Superiority of the new covenant to the Mosaic covenant, taking the components, Moses and Abraham and Levitical system, and now we're putting it all together. Angels, the mediators of the covenant, putting all those sub-components, and now we take the system. That's what he's been building to. Taking point by point, piece by piece by piece. I take the carburetor, take the engine, take the interior, take the frame and the structure, right? And if I can demonstrate, take the tire, I can demonstrate that each part of your automobile needs work, is inferior, and I can then show you, well, then you need to replace the car itself. I got a car that in all the components are superior. In fact, the entire structure. In today's language, we could talk about systemic, right? The Levitical covenant, the priesthood, the Mosaic covenant is systemically, as a system, inferior to that what Jesus has established. Superiority of the new covenant, the Brit Hadashah, to the Mosaic covenant. So much the more, also, Yeshua has become the guarantee of a better covenant. It's a guarantee when you go to make a loan or to take a loan out, you've got to have some kind of guarantee. You've got to have some kind of collateral, right? You take an oath. In the ancient world, this was no different than it is. In fact, it was more solemn than it is today. These are tablets. On the left-hand side is a tablet from the 6th century BC, from Persia. On the right, a 13th century tablet from the Hittites. Both of these are tablets of oaths guaranteeing that certain events will happen. Here we see a Roman coin from 300 AD, something like this. Forget about the guy in the left, that's the god Mars. But on the back, we see two soldiers holding their spears, holding their swords, and in the middle, you have this young man, this youth, who's taking an oath of allegiance to the army, to the armed forces of Rome. So the idea of an oath, a guarantee, the swords are on, he's carrying a pig. The swords are on the pig. A guarantee, watch out that if you violate your oath, there'll be some bloodshed. So that's the idea. So oath, nothing new, guarantee, collateral, all of these things are timeless in culture. And that's why we all could understand the concept of guarantee or collateral or down payment or bond, surety. Not Shirley, the girl I used to date in high school. Surety, right? S-U-R-E-T-Y, legal term. Well, the author is arguing Yeshua is the new covenant's guarantee. Yeshua is the guarantee. How do I know I can trust the new covenant? Because of Yeshua. How do I know the promises of the new covenant will be true? Yeshua. How do I know that what Yeshua said at the Last Supper, at that Seder meal, that we can be forgiven, that we can be forgiven our sins, that we can be reconciled to God, whether we're Jewish or Gentile? How do I know it's true? Yeshua. Yeshua is the new covenant guarantee. See, the author is arguing better hope stems from better covenant. The Torah provided good hope. It's good hope, right? Not no hope, good hope. But this is a better hope, superior hope. Mosaic covenant, it's good covenant. This is a better covenant. Doesn't reflect on the quality of the covenant unless you're comparing the two, right? Nobody complains on a dark night that the light that a full moon provides is substandard. Dark night, I'm very happy for a bright full moon. Provides some good light. Helps me find my keys at night. But nobody would ever compare the moon to the sun and say, yeah, the moon, the sun, who can tell, who can make a quality judgment? Judge not, lest you be judged, right? No, you can see the criteria, which one's putting out better lumens. The moon is simply reflecting the light of the sun, and so is inferior as a light source. Sun, I don't read by the light of the noon, of the moon rather, but I do read by the noon sunlight. Better hope, better covenant. The former priests, on the one hand, existed in greater numbers because they were prevented by death from continuing, i.e., they couldn't continue because they would die. They weren't permanent fixtures. So starting with Aaron, this is Aaron's tomb in Jordan, traditional tomb where he's up at the top of the mountain where he dies. And then from the first century, Josephus Caiaphas, we have his ossuary in the Israel Museum. That's where Joseph Caiaphas's bones were rested. When his body decomposed, they assembled them like a jigsaw puzzle. They took apart and put it in the box. Right? And you're going to take him in a trunk and take him on a road trip. But either way, 1,500 years of priesthood, not one of them made it past one lifetime. From Aaron to Josephus Caiaphas. In fact, Josephus, writing in the Antiquities of the Jews, he said, accordingly, the number of the high priests from the days of Herod, this is only from Herod, which is, like 35 years, something like this, let's say 35, 37 years before the time of the New Testament, or the time of the birth of our Messiah, 30 years thereabouts. The days of Herod, until the days when Titus took the temple and the city and burnt them, 70 A.D. So this is how crazy the system was by the time the author of Hebrews is writing. 28 high priests. The time that belonged to them was 107 years. So from 37, whatever it is, 35, but 107 years, you had 28 high priests. And one of them, Annas, he actually served for like 18 years. So you had a couple that actually had some substantial time as high priest. So that means you had an amazing turnover rate. Some only lasted a year, some only lasted 2 years, some not even that long. But Yeshua, you go from high turnover, first century high priesthood, but Yeshua, on the other hand, because he continues forever, he holds his high priesthood permanently. Permanently. Forever. His high priesthood is permanent. There'll be no changes here. There'll be no turnover here. One of the things that I always had to deal with in doing these Passover Seders is that you develop a relationship with the banquet coordinators and say, okay, this is exactly how I want my big Seder meal, right? And they know all the details and they know all the peculiarities that I bring to the table and all the things that the details, whatever. And then I'll turn around and I'll say, hey, let's set up for the next, and that person has been replaced. And I got to start all over again with a new employee who doesn't know my peculiarities and the details that I want. Yeshua, there's no turnover here. His priesthood is a permanent one. Therefore, because it's permanent, he is able also to save forever. Present tense. To save forever. He is even now saving forever those who draw near to God through him. If you correlate that, if you do not go through him, you are not drawing near to God. You may think you're drawing near to God, but you are not. If you are not drawing near to God through him. Anything else, you're fooling yourself. Psychological confusion. But he always lives because he's permanent. He always lives to make intercession for them. Who's them? Those who draw near to God through him. That's me. And I hope that's you. If you are a follower of Messiah, if you're a follower of Yeshua, if you're a follower of Jesus, then you have drawn near to God through him, and therefore he is always living and always on the job. What is his job currently? Not just sitting on the throne at his Father's right hand doing needlepoint. He's making intercession for you and for me. You having a hard week? Yeah, me too. Having a hard month? Yeah, me too. He understands that. He's making intercession for you and for me. Got it tough at work? Yeah, me too. Yeshua is aware. And he's having a continual conversation with his Father. Interceding, not begging, interceding on our behalf. An interested party. In fact, he's like an advocate on our behalf. He is our righteous advocate, as 1 John chapter 2 calls him. Our righteous advocate, making intercession for us, which is what we should have expected, Isaiah 53. Therefore, I will allot him a portion with the great. He will divide the booty with the strong, because he poured out himself to death, and he was numbered with the transgression. Yet he himself bore the sin of many and interceded for the transgressors. If you violate God's holy standard, that makes you someone who is transgressed. But you're covered. Doesn't mean you have freedom to continue to transgress, carte blanche to transgress, because you have someone always interceding for you. And, we use the term always lives. He lives to do that. Some people, you say, well, that guy lives for his family. He lives for his family. He lives for his job. He's a workaholic. That's not the concept of he lives to, nothing brings him more joy than to intercede on our behalf. That's not what it's saying. It's saying he's permanent. He always lives. Therefore, his intercession is always percolating. The conversation is ongoing with his Father. So he interceded for us, the transgressors. We see a little tidbit of that in John chapter 17. Take you back a few years to our discussion on the Gospel of John. Jesus praying says, I do not ask on behalf of these, the disciples, alone, but for those who believe in me through their word. That's you and me. Yeshua interceded for us even before he took his seat at the right hand of the Father. That they may all be one, even as you, Father, are in me and I in you. That they may also be in us, so that the world may believe that you sent me. World, our culture, there are forces at play that are determined to drive us apart and to pit one another and each particular group, not leaving it groups, but extending to individuals, to pit one another at each other's throats. That's the very opposite of what Yeshua prays for. And we, the disciples of Yeshua, are the answer to what this culture needs. A culture that's steeped in Marxist power plays. This group is powerful, therefore this group is powerless. The powerful oppress those who are less fortunate. And so we have this culture of resentment, and one group against this group, grievance against grievance. Yeshua is the answer. And the world will then believe if we are demonstrating that unity. Jew, Gentile, black, white, male, female, Asian, Hispanic, you name it. The world sees that. That will be powerful. Our Messiah prayed for that. Well, let's wrap it up. For it was fitting for us to have such a high priest. Such a high priest do we have. Let me tell you what a high priest we have. He's holy. He's holy. He is innocent. He is undefiled. Now remember, he's comparing Yeshua as high priest to the politicians who have been jockeying for position over the past 130 years that Josephus was writing about. The high priesthood, the Levitical high priesthood, was a fairly corrupt system. But our high priest, holy, innocent, undefiled, separated from sinners, doesn't mean he can't relate to you. He died for you if you're a sinner. But if you believe in him, you are a holy one. You're a saint who may occasionally act inconsistently with your identity. Separated from sinners, he is exalted above the heavens. He's active, not frantic. He doesn't bow, stand, prostrate himself, wave his arms, offer sacrifice. Our perfect high priest makes his intercession on our behalf while he's seated on a throne next to his Father, right at his right hand. Who does not need daily, like those high priests, to offer up sacrifices. High priest, Levitical system, made offerings personal. He actually did it for himself. Personal offerings twice a day with the other priests. Doesn't need to offer up sacrifice, first for his own sins, and then for the sins of the people. Of course, that's illustrating Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement. That was the big day, where before he made intercession for anybody else, he made intercession for his own self and his immediate family. Jesus doesn't do that, because he did this once for all when he offered up himself. Once for all when he offered up himself. We took today communion. It's not another sacrifice of our mess. It's a commemoration. It's a memorial. It's a remembrance. Because his sacrifice was once for all when he offered up himself. He's the message, he's the messenger, he's the high priest and the sacrifice, all rolled up into one. For the law appoints men as high priests who are weak. But the word of the oath, the divine oath, Psalms 110, verse 4, you are a divine priest forever after the order of Melchizedek. The oath came after the law appoints a son made perfect forever. And there's that one Levitical high priest that came near to perfection. You might think and wax nostalgically about our friend Aaron. Remember what happened with Aaron in chapter 32 of Exodus. Moses is upset because Aaron has crafted the golden calf. And Aaron said, well, the people, they tore off their gold earrings and I threw it in the fire and out came the calf. It's what we call a whopper. Aaron, none of them were perfect, not near perfect. But God's son, Yeshua, our high priest, he has been made perfect through his sacrifice forever. Now, there's a chart that I'm going to show you next week. We'll go through it as we begin our discussion of chapter 8. I'll use that as a summary of what we covered. Let me just wrap it up. Yeshua's work in salvation goes far beyond that of the single moment in which we were initially saved. Somebody gets saved and say, oh yes, God came down. Yeshua reached down and grabbed my heart. That may be true. But if Yeshua came and he grabbed your heart, don't assume he's ever let it go. If Yeshua has come to you and you to him, he's the guest who's never leaving. In fact, he's taking over the house, room by room. Some rooms, here, let me show you. Let me open the door for you. Let me show you around. Other rooms, you don't want to go in there. That's a mess. Yeah, well, Yeshua can be intrusive. And he's going to go into all those rooms. Slowly, slowly. But before you know it, you will achieve glorification. Of course, you'll be dead then. But nonetheless, you're in a process. Yeshua is cleaning house, your house, the house of your life. And so it's not just a single moment when we're initially saved. That's not where his work is done. His salvation power extends throughout every moment of every believer's lifetime. And it assures that our salvation is true today, is certain today, and it ensures our eventual arrival into his presence at our final tomorrow. When we pass through this life and this run is complete, we don't stop. We simply transition. And we move directly into his presence at our final tomorrow. There is no final anything, just a transition. This life is transitory. And the sooner that we grasp that and live our lives in light of the transitory nature becomes truer and truer as I get older. You know, this was more theoretical when I was 28 versus now 58. Begins to hit home when you lose a parent. Or when now I'm in the club of both parents. Many of you are in that club as well. And everybody's rotated on, and you've rotated up. And you somehow find yourself as the patriarch or matriarch in your clan. But in my mind, I'm still 28 years old. But in reality, I'm not. And ready or not, life is here. And the life that we live for our Messiah. With the certainty that gives us strength for today. The bright hope for tomorrow. It's the bright hope for tomorrow. The better hope, the better covenant, the better priesthood that gives us strength for today to live whatever lives we live. Some of us live quiet lives of desperation. I've heard that, I read that. Some of us live lives of desperation, but not so quietly. But nonetheless, no need for desperation because our Messiah awaits us. There's no salvation apart from Yeshua. There's no relationship with God apart from him. No matter what our contemporary age of tolerance, ecumenism may claim. It doesn't matter to me what Oprah says or anybody like that. I know it's not cool, it's not hip, it's not politically correct to say there's only one way to God. But I'm old-fashioned that way, and I hope you are too. Just quoting the Bible. Yeshua is the sole provision that God has made for humanity's salvation. So if you have not availed yourself of God's only sole provision for your salvation, what are you waiting for? Go long. Go big. Don't shy away. This is no time. This is no time to ignore what's in front of us. And for those of us, the majority of us, who have chosen Yeshua because of God's grace choosing us, what kind of lifestyle are you living? I know what kind of lifestyles I'm seeing on TV and reading about and hearing about that's so frustrating and aggravating. The loudest voices in the culture. How about we take our place as the loudest voices in the culture? So that whether they like our message or not, our message is unmistakable. That Yeshua is the only answer for every single one of us. There is hope. There is love. There is humanity, true humanity. There is unity. But it's only through God and through the provision he's made through his Son. Well, that's enough for today. Let's go ahead and stand for the Aaronic benediction.